Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School Podcast, a man that hopefully for those of you with HBO Max subscriptions are well aware of and well familiar with. For those of you that lean certain ways politically, you probably already know who this person is, especially if you were around during the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. His movie, the short film 38 at the Garden, is now available, as I mentioned, on HBO Max. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Frank Chi, how are you today, sir?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. It's, we're obviously in the middle of a bit of a whirlwind press tour, but I'm really glad to take the time to talk to you. And thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you. And, I'm sure you've gotten the reaction from the obvious places of like why you were attached to the project. I have to come at it from what I know, and I'm coming at it from a Knicks fan. And I know Linsanity on a much different level means so much more to like the Asian-American community, and on a much lower level that's less important. It means so much to Knicks fans as well, because it's the one like pure unadulterated joy that we experienced over the past like 20 years. Yes, so I want to start there and get that out of the way. Have you heard that from Knicks fans and their reaction to the Knicks fans that have seen the film?
Oh yeah. And like, look, I'll just be real with you. I am a struggling, dormant Knicks fan. Like I'm one of those. Okay. I'm one of those kids that like grew up like a front runner 90s Bulls fan, and then when MJ retired, I was like, I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm like, okay, I need a team. I can't root for the Bulls anymore. And that was '99, the lockout year, when LJ hitting that 4-pointer. Like I became a Knicks fan. Right? Mm-hmm. We go to the finals. We all think we have a chance. We don't have a chance, but like, and then like the next year they went to the conference finals, right? Like, so like I became a Knicks fan that way. But I, because the team breaks my heart so much, I just go in and out, and Linsanity was when I went really in, you can imagine. So I have the double whammy of being Asian American and being a Knicks fan. So in many ways, that's the reason why I think the movie feels the way that it does, right? Because I am taking people into my lens as close as possible, but it was clearly the lens of millions of people, which is why the interview subjects can essentially replace me talking, I think, so well. I mean, in many ways, way better than I could say anything, to be honest.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that the people that you interviewed and your interview subjects for the film are, they can fill in for your perspective just as well. And yet, one of my curiosities, since I know that now I knew you were a Knicks fan. That was going to be my question. Did you grow up a Knicks fan? And that's another way that you were attached to it.
Yeah,
flat out, what was your reaction when Linsanity was happening? I know you did a whole film that kind of tells the story of your reaction, but from your words, what was going on as it was happening?
Me personally, I lost my mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, can you imagine? Like so I'll put it this way. I am, if anything, I'm like a diehard UConn fan because I grew up in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And the first time I ever heard of Jeremy Lin was, in the movie, he talks about he purposely didn't get a scholarship offer from any team, any school, but he was like, I'm going to go to Harvard because it's D1 and I get to play against other D1 schools. Well, it worked, right? Because he goes into Gamble Pavilion the year after UConn makes the Final Four. UConn has like Kemba Walker, okay? And he drops, this is an ESPN team, that's an ESPN televised game. He drops 30 on UConn and dunks twice. And I was like, what? Like who is this? I'm not from a lot of Asian Americans have like Cali memories of Jeremy, right? They heard about him from high school or whatever, but like, I grew up around here. So like, I was just like, what's going on? And I didn't hear much about him. I mean, I somewhat followed his career afterwards. I knew that the Warriors picked him up and I thought that was cool, but I didn't have any expectations, to be honest with you. I think everybody felt that way. Except for Jeremy and his family, right? Like and this is sort of part of the way the stereotypes are internalized for a lot of Asian Americans. Hassan Minhaj talks about this really well in the movie. So when he got onto the Knicks, I was just like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't like rooting. I was like, man, this guy's never getting any playing time. D'Antoni's never going to put this guy on the court, right? And I remember I didn't watch that Nets game when he checked in. I didn't watch it. But I remember like watching SportsCenter afterwards, being like, "Yo, what? Like this is real." And then remember, like this is like, I think Baron Davis just hurt his back. I mean, the Knicks were like down and out on injuries, right? So, I mean, like, and then what happened afterwards? I was like, I'll put it this way to people: like, if you wrote that out and you pitch it to a movie studio, they'd be like, "Get out of here."
Well, it's funny you mentioned the movie studio part of it, because I was reading a couple of interviews that you did, and you said how Bend It Like Beckham was one of the more important films to you. And a lot of sports movies, as somebody who grew up watching sports and obviously developed a passion into a career around covering sports, there are movies that I fall for and go revisit all the time. And yet the Jeremy Lin story is a sports movie that script, like if you've said it, I'm pretty sure in one of your interviews, that's the script gets rejected. Like this is not supposed to happen the way that it was. And yet, especially the Laker game, like I'll just share a little bit of my perspective. I was in college at the time, and the first half of that season had beaten it out of me so bad. Like they were 18-25 when that first Nets game happened, that I didn't renew my NBA League Pass subscription. So I was like, you know what? Let me get good grades this semester. This is just not worth my time. And then for the first night, because that Nets game was a third night of a back-to-back-to-back. They lose in Boston. They lose against Chicago at home. And this was, again, the lockout shortened season. So everybody had to play one back-to-back-to-back. And that Friday night, D'Antoni, desperate for his job, was like, I'm going to put this guy in and see what happens. Yeah. And then I, like you, checked the box score. I was like, wait, what? Okay. So we have a point guard points. Now. What? Then the next two nights happen. And I was like, all right, he's playing Kobe on Friday. Yeah. I can actually see it because I'm in Virginia. And so I went with a bunch of buddies and we watched it live. And obviously the rest is history. What went into making the Laker game the focus of the doc?
I'll tell you what. I'll give you I'll give you some background on how we came up with this idea.
Okay, cool.
My background, as you mentioned, is in politics, and I entered politics as like a Barack Obama person. I as an act of belonging, right? And it was because me and one of my producers, Trayvon Free, in 2020, we were having this conversation. Yeah. Right. And Trayvon and I were talking about impossible moments. Like, what is a moment when society at large tells a group of people you can't do something, and then somebody comes out of nowhere and just shatters in front of the whole world? And we were obviously talking about in the context of Obama. That is the OG impossible moment for anyone that's alive. And so he was like, "Yo, what other moments feel like that?" And I'm like, "Listen, man. I'm Asian. There's only one answer, and it's Linsanity." Yeah. And the way I said it to him was, the two most magical nights of my life is the night that Obama was elected president and the night Jeremy dropped 38 at the Garden. That's why the movie is called 38 at the Garden. It's from that conversation.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So I was living in DC at the time, right? And I missed that Wizards game. I had some kind of thing I couldn't get out of. And, he dunked on John. I was so angry at myself that I missed that game. So I was just like, I'm not missing the Lakers game. Maybe this is the game where it all ends because it is Kobe, right? Maybe it is. But I hop on the Amtrak. I just take a train up, and I'm like, Penn Station is right. You literally go up the escalator to the Garden. I remember I was running up the escalator. I just got out of the train. I just ran up the escalator, and I tried to get in, and the scalpers were merciless. I think it was $700 for nosebleeds, right? I'm 27, 26. I have no money. I was I don't know what to do, right? I'm going to be really bummed if I missed this game, but I'm not paying $700 for nosebleeds. Okay. So, Koreatown's right next door. So I end up going to Koreatown, and I plop myself down at one of the karaoke bars. And I'm like, all right, I'll watch it this way. And I tell Jeremy this. I'm looking back on it, I don't think I would have traded that experience for actually even being in the Garden. Because I was surrounded by people who look like me, or maybe my age, a little bit older. And, you know the game. We all know the game. There's 2 hours of people losing their minds, right? So I'm surrounded by people who look like me, and they're people are running around, they're crying into their beer, they're screaming. And I'm I'm doing all those things too, but I'm what is it? Is it maybe the wall of stereotypes that people feel like they have to deal with every day, and all of a sudden they have this cathartic reaction seeing someone break all of them on the world stage? Is it I don't know, the fact that maybe your parents made you play violin and piano and didn't let you play basketball, that you're just living your childhood dream through somebody who came out of nowhere and did it? Like, is it the internal conflict, the external conflict? Is it both? It was certainly both for me, to be honest with you, right? And like, that's why I reacted that way. And I if forever, like I remember at the end of the night, there was like some guy who was like 3-4 people down from me at the bar. And like, it's obvious at this point, the Knicks were going to win. It's just like when he hit the free throws and it was like, it's over, right? And this guy just like, he slams the table and he just runs out the door, right? And you're like, and usually like a bartender would be like, get him back and use the paper as tap. That's what he was saying. It was like that kind of night, right? And
yeah,
I mean, looking back, I mean, just like telling that story makes me emotional. And how can we recreate that emotion while living through all of the highlights, right? The Derek Fisher spin move is like the thing that I remember the most from the game, right? We obviously put an onus on that. The shot that he takes to seal the game, the way we describe it in the movie, that's another big moment for me. But like, honestly, a lot of it was like the pregame stuff when Kobe was like, yo, I don't know who this kid is. And I had never heard Jeremy's story about that, right? He's sitting like, I'm just gonna take the shot 50-50. If I'm open, I'm just gonna take the shot. I'm like, damn, right? Like I just didn't know his mindset walking into that game. But man, like again, what we're saying, like Bend to Like Beckham was like the most important movie of my life. Right. And I described 30 at the Garden and more or less what happened, what Jeremy did as Bend to Like Beckham on steroids.
Yeah.
Right. It's as if the girl in Bend to Like Beckham came to the US and then became the best like female soccer player for like 2 weeks. Right. Like that's, if you put that in the movie, people be like, get out of here. If Bend to Like Beckham 2 was about that, people wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the part about Linsanity that just, again, the rejection of the script that will always blow my mind. It wasn't just that he came and got a shot and was good. He was running the league for 2.5 weeks, you know? And again, I'm unfortunately being at that school out of state. I don't have the New York atmosphere to compare it to. So I could really only compare it to like what my friends were saying about the game. And then obviously, and the documentary makes it, hold on. I got to get, my friends have, my film friends have corrected me. The film, it's just because the documentary doesn't mean it's not a film. I will correct myself on that. The film does a good job of the perspective of obviously what this film means to Asian Americans, what it means to minorities. And so I appreciate like what it means for people that don't look like me. Have you talked to, obviously you interviewed Jeremy, you sat down with him and got to know him through this, but like, had you ever had a conversation with Jeremy Lin? Like, what was it like meeting him for the first time?
Well, when we first came up with the idea, we didn't know Jeremy. Okay. Right? But our other producer, Simon Hernandez, like, he knows every athlete in America. So within like 1 degree of separation, we were on the phone with him. And, you know, look, I can't imagine what it's like to become a symbol for people. You're a human being, right? Like, how do you react to becoming a symbol? People putting their hopes and dreams onto you. I wouldn't be able to handle that. But I think if you don't know somebody but that person means a lot to you, what they did means a lot to you, you sort of just assume that like they see it exactly the way that you do. I think we're all human. We all tend to do that. And I just always assumed that Jeremy like saw it exactly the way that I did. Right. And when I first talked to him, I was struck by like just how humble he was about the process. He was like, look, man, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to not get cut. Like, I'm not thinking about the societal impact of me hitting this shot. Like, I'm trying to make it in the league. So that was like really like illuminating for me, just being like, you know, like, yeah, like these are human beings. They're not just symbols. Like they have to do it. Right. And the second thing he said to me that really struck me was like, you know, like after Linsanity happened, he played 9 years in the NBA. He was like, you know, like I ran away from Linsanity for a long time because I didn't want it to be defined by it. I didn't want that to be the only thing people remember me for my career. Right. And that really struck me too, because I just didn't even think about it. I was like, he doesn't get it. Of course he gets it like that. And I appreciated how open he was to me about the fact that he didn't enjoy Linsanity for so long. And I gave him my perspective, right? And I obviously, given my background and given the fact that we were just talking about that impossible moment thing, I kept on saying Obama. He was like, yo, you need to stop comparing me to Obama.
To the president.
So that was really funny. But again, like once we got to the point where like, hey, this is happening in the context of this is so many people's favorite Asian American memory, but we're reliving it during the worst time to be Asian American in modern history, right? How important is it for us to remind people that anything is possible? Because I'll tell you what, when we make a movie, like the first thing we're thinking about is like, who we're making it for? Like, who's the audience, right? And I thought we were making a millennial nostalgia movie. Totally honest with you, right? I had no idea that we actually were making like a movie for kids.
What do you mean, a movie for kids?
The movie's about anything is possible. If you think about, we had a Knicks screening at Tribeca, and Jeremy invited a lot of like Asian American community organizations to come. And you've seen the end of the movie, you know what it's about. There's this little kid, he's like no older than 10 years old. He's sitting there near the front. He's weeping. He's weeping. I don't know what you were like when you were 10. I was an idiot. Maybe unless it was like Friday the 13th or something, there was no movie that was gonna make me cry. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't understand society on that level. So like I was like, what does this kid see in the last couple of years to make someone that young weep at the end of the movie? And if you think about what it's like to be like an Asian American parent these days, you're sending your kid to school and you're like, stay masked, don't say a word. If you make the noise, especially if you sneeze, they're going to call you China virus. They're going to call you Kung flu. Like don't draw attention to yourself. That is not any way to raise a child, period. Right. And but I'm not blaming them. Like they don't want their kid to be bullied. Right. But those kids they most likely weren't alive when Linsanity happened. And if they were very young. So what I didn't realize was, yes, we're making a nostalgia movie for people in their late 30s who had this incredible moment, right? But the actual audience are the kids who never saw it happen, who are being sort of, beaten into their head every day to be quiet and not make noise and not draw attention to yourself. The point of Linsanity is to take the shot, to be yourself, to make space for yourself in a country that doesn't really make space for you. And when I realized that, I love to sit here and tell you that that's what our intent was, but we didn't know that that's how it was going to so many people come up to us and they're like in tears and they're like, we're going to go home and we're going to watch this with our kids. We want our kids to watch this movie. And that's been really special, man. The age of anti-Asian violence is like hard for people to talk about because it's such a hard topic. But if I were to describe 30 at the Garden without any basketball whatsoever, I would say part one is about stereotypes. Part two is about what happens when someone shatters those stereotypes on the world stage. And part three is about today when those stereotypes have been weaponized. And then when they're weaponized, they turn into anti-Asian violence. It's not very hard to understand. When I say it out loud, right? Like those stereotypes have been around. They were around when I was a kid growing up. I just didn't feel I was threatened all day. All of a sudden they get weaponized during the age of COVID and we have anti-Asian violence. So as long as we can have that conversation, as long as we can also relive how incredible Linsanity was, whether you're Asian American or Knicks fan or just a fan of underdogs in general, right? And as long as it can have that kind of impact, not just on Asian Americans who remember that so fondly, but on kids who need to see an example that anything is possible in this country, then we've done our job.
Well said, man. You answered all of the questions about what the actual important message of the movie that I had, I was wondering what the intent was going in. I was wondering the timeline of if you had the idea and this was storyboarded before the pandemic started and then took on a new tone as it kept going. I guess one of my other questions would just be is it important you got to tell this story, that it wasn't no disrespect to any of the other white directors out there, but that someone with your background got to tell it? Denzel has this clip that went viral a couple of years ago that he had to be the one to tell Fences, or like Scorsese had to be the one to tell the story of Goodfellas, or Spielberg,
right.
Schindler's List. Like, is it important that you got to tell the story of Linsanity?
I think so. I'm not like I think as long as you surround yourself with a good team, you have the right perspective, and you're really respectful, like things can be collaborative, right? I'm always someone that believes that. But I think that as long as, like for example, there are jokes in that movie that like you just don't know. Not like you can't even tell. Like you just don't know if you're not Asian. You know what I mean? Like the way we talk about David Ho, like in the childhood part.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like David Ho was on my fridge, like when I was a kid. You know, like that's what I mean. It's like those are really unique perspectives that obviously somebody from that background will be able to have. Telling a story about Asian Americans, right? Like you can't tell a story about Jeremy Lin. You know, I guess you can. You could talk about it. Just what happened on the court. It was crazy, frenzy in New York, right? Like basketball everywhere. Like you can tell that story, but it will be devoid of the identity issues and just the point of view that I think is really important to tell a story like that. But like, you know, like this is the unfortunate part of like fighting for more representation, like in the industry that I think is trying to do good, but it's also just this gigantic behemoth that is hard to move. You have more and more examples of people who get to tell stories that otherwise wouldn't have been told. But you know, I'll just be very honest with you about one of the reasons why we made it a short. Like we made it a short because of the Asian story. Like this is not a story about, you know, somebody kicking someone in the head or, you know, somebody really rich and acting outrageous. You know, like this is not. This is a story about an Asian guy who defies the odds, right? And unfortunately, all the movies that I love about Asian Americans that tell like a really authentic story to me, they don't get any buzz, man.
Yeah.
Right. That it's not like this gigantic kung fu flick or something. And like, we were like, when we approached this, we were like, man, like, we're not going to give anybody excuses not to watch. It's going to be 38 minutes. Right. Especially as we got closer, we're like, oh, it could be 30 minutes. Let's make it 38 minutes. Because that's the bargain that we're striking with the American viewer. Right. People like don't pay attention to Asian stories unless you fit one of those dynamics that I said earlier. And we were like, okay, we could do it in 38 minutes. We're going to do it in 38 minutes. And we're going to make sure that like, if you tell me that you haven't watched it, you can't say it with a straight face, because I'm going to be like, man, are you sure you don't have 38 minutes to sit down and just watch the movie? You can't tell me that. That's right up the reason why we made it a short. It's because, all of these reasons factor into making the movie. And obviously that's a decision that I made because I'm Asian too.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to, it clicked way too late that what you meant by outrageous and rich. Cause yes, Crazy Rich Asians. Yes.
No,
loved that movie.
I love Crazy Rich Asians. Yeah. I love House of Ho. I watch all of those things. Right. But like at the end of the day, like I don't want to be outrageous to get noticed, you know? And
have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Amazing. Blows my mind.
Yeah.
I've seen it 3 times in theaters now. And like every single time I'm just like, I feel delirious. Right. Yeah. Well, that's the best way you can put it. And the fact that got made the way that it did is extraordinary.
Yeah. It's currently my number 1 of 2022. So I'm curious if I doubt anything will top it, because I'm also on my next viewing will also be like my 4th or 5th. It gets better every time. Couple more before I let you go. A little bit about the filmmaking in the movie. Like we're talking about as you said, the impossible nature of the story and just the legend that is Linsanity. And there's animation throughout the movie, and it almost helped make it feel like a dream that you recreated parts of the story and the movie, and like the game through the animation. I just spot on Mike D'Antoni cartoon illustrations, I should say. The voice that Tyson Chandler does for Mike D'Antoni I want to make that my text ringtone. What went into the decision to include the illustrations throughout the movie?
Our animator is incredible. His name's Miguel Hernandez.
Okay.
Die-hard Knicks fan.
Okay.
Die-hard. So like that perspective, obviously it fit. Everything fit for this movie. Look, there are things about retelling a story that happened 10 years ago that's not all on camera, especially the private sections. You know, like we get footage of on the court and like some of the hype around it. But, you know, like if you don't have animation, how are you going to tell that couch story, man?
Yeah.
Right?
When they show the couch being shorter and shorter,
right.
Major Field's couch. Yeah.
You know, if you don't have it, like, how do you tell the story about stereotypes in the beginning, right? We have that run of stereotypes in the TV. Mm-hmm. I think animation and both just the choice of having comedians be such a big part of this movie. It adds lightness to a really heavy topic. And I think it comes across that way. So it's a combination of like bringing some lightness to the story and the fact that some of these things you just can't, you just have to recreate because they're so personal.
Yeah.
That's why we went the animation route, but it's so good. I mean, I'm going to sit here. I said it earlier about the music, right? Our composer, Gina Hahn, is just a genius, right? It just feels kinetic. Like when you're sitting there, you're watching this game, you hear those drums, it feels like you're on the edge of your seat. I mean, whether it's Gina with the composer or Miguel Hernandez, our animator, or just our DP, Othello Benassi, the way he framed all these shots. I mean, everything is beautiful. It really is.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed the filmmaking throughout. I was curious if anything that you wanted to include, because this is where I will take credit. I picked up on the 38 minutes. It's like, oh, I see what you guys are doing here right away. Yeah. So did anything get cut because you were trying to be so precise with the runtime?
I mean, we didn't cut anything for the runtime. There were a couple interviews that I wish we could have gotten. And then there are a couple of interviews that it didn't end up fitting. I think, you know, the folks that you see that's on screen are like, I mean, it's just, you have three comedians at the top of their game. Mm-hmm. That's the only way I can put it. Like Jenny Yang, Ronnie Chang, Hassan Minhaj are like, they're literally operating on a level that I can't. It made me realize just how much of a skill being funny is, right? Mm. I think if you don't really interact with comedians at all, you think it's like a God-given talent or something. You really do. And then you realize like it's a craft and like people hone it every day. And that was like one of those things I was really awed at during that interview process. And just like, you know, people who aren't even comedians are funny in the movie. Like Shump is hilarious. Shump is like, I mean, the way Shump describes scenes, right? The way there were just some things, the way he put them, I was like, wow, like I've thought that way, but I've never described it that way. I don't think I ever could even put a gun to my head. I couldn't describe it that way. Like the way he was like, you ever play to get basketball against the guy who's sleeping on the couch, right? Like playing against a desperate man is totally different. I mean, that brings you in immediately in a way that I didn't even think I could say it like that. So Tyson is hilarious. Jeremy is hilarious.
Yeah, I was going to say Jeremy's very funny too.
Yeah, everybody brings it in a way where we're like, okay, like I mean, like the Knicks fans we talked to, they were all hilarious. Like so, once we realized what the tone was, we sort of we zeroed in on the interviews that really fit that vibe.
No, it makes sense. So before I let you go, I'll just say, like, one of the things I said in my review, you're hinting at it now, the humor that exists throughout like the first 2/3 of the movie. And then the gut punch of the fade to black and then present day and just realizing where we are really adds a lot of heart to this film and this story. And look, Knicks fans will hopefully go there because they want to relive a time that just everything was awesome for a good 2.5 weeks. And we didn't care when or if it was going to end. We just wanted to enjoy like the one good thing that nobody could say anything bad about for 2 weeks.
Hey, and then hopefully this year is better, right?
Well, some of us, like, listen, I'm actually very high in the current team.
Hey, that game last night, the preseason game was great.
Wasn't it great? Yeah. Listen, we tried to, it's funny because he's now a friend of the pod, Jeremy Lin. We were saying Jalen Brunson is the best since Stephon Marbury, but we also have added the addendum and, of course, friend of the pod, Jeremy Lin.
I mean, okay, I'll take that. But, I've always a partial Kemba Walker person because of UConn. So,
well, I know.
We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to talk about it. I'm still upset about it.
I'm sure. Listen, that version of Kemba is not the representative sample size of Kemba Walker. So, totally listen, true. I grew up a UConn fan too. I was like, obviously, when I went to college, I had to adopt the alma mater, but still,
it just feels like for like New York homecomings, they've become like a curse. You know what I mean? It just makes me, because like it just looks so right. That's why I felt when I was a kid about Stephon too. I was like, it just looks so right. It looks so right, like homecoming king, right? And it just doesn't work out in a way that just like,
Yeah.
Anyway, I will never get over it as a UConn person. I will never get over it. I'm just being honest.
Well, hopefully the Villanova kid can bring some good memories and bring you and rope you back in. I want to
definitely not the team to rope me back in, but
but believe me, I understand. If I understand. Having said that, one thing I wanted to end the pod with is inspired by one of my favorite podcasts, The Big Picture. Sean Fennessy asks every interview with the filmmaker, the last question is, what's the last great thing you saw? So what is the last great thing you saw? Film, TV show?
I'm one of those like Soderbergh people, as in like I write down everything I watch, and I watch a lot of stuff. I'm literally just going to pull up my list.
Okay.
So
are you on Letterboxd, or is it like?
I'm not. I am on Letterboxd, but I'm definitely not telling you what my what my handle is.
Gotcha.
Like I don't need other filmmakers knowing what.
No, it's totally fair. Totally fair. I just didn't know if that was the list you were going to, or if you had like an Excel spreadsheet. For like years I had a list in my notes in my phone, and then I found out Letterboxd exists. And was I could have been ranking it here the whole time.
The last TV show that I really loved was The Undeclared War.
Okay. What's that about?
It's about cyber war between the UK and Russia.
Okay.
Unbelievable. This summer, I really loved The Offer. About the
retelling of the Godfather. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say most recent movie it's obviously Everything Everywhere All at Once. I watched it again on the $3 September 3rd day. That was my movie to watch. For the bargain day. Yeah. I also I'll be honest with you, man, like I love Top Gun. Like that movie has
no business being as good as it is. And yet it's outstanding.
I would put it this way. If you're a story person, you understand this really well. It feels as epic as it does because it's two really big story arcs wrapped into one. It's a reconciliation story between him and Goose's son, but it's also a swan song for him as like the last pilot before the age of the drones, right? So you have a reconciliation story wrapped in a swan song. And that's when you put those things together, it feels incredible. I mean, it's storytelling, filmmaking at its height. Even if you don't like the culture, even if you don't like what Top Gun represents, like you just can't deny that.
Yeah, no, believe me, I agree. Both movies in my top 5 for the year so far. Frank, this was a blast. Thank you for taking the time. I know we do this at the end, and we do this at the end of every interview where we ask people to plug something, but I'm pretty sure this whole thing was a plug for the thing that you'd like people to go see. So I'll do it for you. 38 at the Garden is available on HBO Max. It is 38 minutes. And if you are a Knicks fan watching this, if you are a person watching this, it is well worth your time. Anything you'd like to say before you get out of here?
No, I appreciate you taking the time, Andrew. And I hope people I'll put it this way. I hope people watch it with their kids. That's the best experience that I think I can describe for what this movie will mean to people. So,
awesome.
Yeah. There you go. Garden, October 11th.
There you go. Thank you, Frank.
Appreciate it, Andrew.